Slava Mariupol, Our Family Story. Episode 6, Life in a Medieval Graveyard. Here's a map to orient you for this episode. We'll be looking exclusively at the three locations furthest to the west or to the left: Metro Store and Port City Mall that lie along the Zaporizhzhia Highway, and the apartment at 63 Kuprina. As you recall from last episode, at the end of March, Mother had moved back into her freezing, windowless apartment that had no food, no water, and no electricity, and was sleeping wrapped in rugs. She had run out of some important medication, but luckily a neighbor that she was never really that close to came through and graciously split her pills with Mother, saving her life. On April 1st, Mother went across the street to Metro and waited in line all day to get a Phoenix SIM card, which would allow her to make calls and send text messages only in Russian-controlled areas. No internet access. She then waited in a second line for several hours to charge her phone. That evening, using her new SIM card, she called a family friend in occupied Donetsk. That lady, in turn, sent my wife a message on her tablet using Viber. My wife called her, and the lady in Donetsk held two devices together. That was our first contact with Mother since February 28th. I was so used to Mother's friendly greeting every morning of Privyet, but this was the exact opposite. Mother was sobbing and crying, and I just heard a voice beyond despair, beyond desperation. I heard the voice of a lost soul trapped in the bottom of hell, begging for mercy. We agreed that she would power up her phone 1 hour each evening so we could exchange information, because we had a lot more than she did. At first we used this lady in Donetsk as a conduit, but later we discovered an exchange in Rostov where we could call her directly, but in all cases we assumed that someone was listening. Here's the exterior of 63 Kuprina, filmed on April 18th, 2022. At this time, Mother was still living inside this building. There are no utilities, no heat, no gas to cook with, no running water. It's just a lifeless, quiet zone that smells like fire and death. This used to be such a place of life, children running around, and now look at it. As in all neighborhoods of Mariupol, this area had shallow graves and yards. To the left, there's a grave right outside an entrance of 67 Kuprina, and to the right, there's a group of graves just south of the hospital behind the church on Matrosova. To the left, you see three graves. This is the base of 110 Metropolitska, and these three ladies were killed in the tank attack that you saw last episode. To the right is a grave right across the street from the bus stop, and you can see Renick number 17 in the background. Here are some graves in the median strip of Kuprina, a little bit further south. You can see this one in the foreground. The date of death was March 12th. Due to all the heavy industry, slag heaps, mining in the area, even under the best of circumstances, the groundwater under Mariupol is unfit to drink. Usually the city pipes its drinking water in from 40 miles to the north, but now the residents of Mariupol had no choice but to drink the groundwater. Add to that the fact that all around there are decaying bodies buried in shallow graves, as well as broken pipes allowing raw sewage to soak into the ground. All that adds up to a toxic stew of drinking liquid that could easily cause a disease outbreak. Since there was no gas, people cooked outside. Here you see some residents heating up some water and some food with some furniture that they had chopped up with the hatchet that you see there on the stairs. Mother took her toxic water from the well and heated it up with some neighbors downstairs before taking it up to her apartment. That was her only water to be used for bathing, cooking, and drinking. April 2022 was the first of several cholera scares in Mariupol due to the deteriorating sanitary conditions in the city. Russian authorities subjected anyone coming out of Mariupol into Russian territory to 2 weeks of quarantine, which included forced deportees and Russian soldiers rotating out on assignment. If you get quarantined in Russia, you know it's pretty bad. Headlines all around the world started to refer to the conditions in Mariupol in terms such as hell on earth, horror city, Mariupol is a graveyard. The UN chief called Mariupol an apocalypse, and another headline referred to medieval conditions. At this point, Mother was weak, sick, tired, cold, hungry, and afraid. But when she could muster the strength, she went over to Port City along the Zaporizhia highway and looked for a ride to Ukrainian territory. But there were no rides, there was no green corridor, nothing was moving. Security around the neighborhood tightened so that you needed a pass to move very far, but she was lucky because the mall was right across the street. There were buses over at Metro and Port City, but they all went to Russia or DNR through filtration. We in the USA were researching any way possible to get her out, including hiring a driver, but there were a lot of scams out there. Some people walked, including 2 young relatives, one with a newborn baby, who walked days and days through Berdansk to escape. Mother was not in a situation to walk out, but we wanted to avoid at all costs having to travel through Russia because you never know if we'll ever hear from her again. People with vehicles were living in their cars on the Zaporizhia highway outside Port City, waiting for a green corridor that never opened. Here's a view looking southeast down the Zaporizhia highway right in front of Port City at the traffic circle. In the background, you can see 75 and 73 Kuprina. These cars had been sitting here for weeks and people were living in their vehicles. The white signs on the windshield refer to children, and the rags tied to the cars designate civilians inside. Finally, at the end of April, the occupiers started handing out food packages at Metro. Here's Russian World coming to Mariupol, all in one photo. By the end of April, Russia had captured the entire city except for the Azovstal steel plant, where a couple hundred civilians were still trapped underground. The UN and Red Cross convinced Russia to allow evacuation of these civilians, and they had overflow buses, each convoy that would stop at Port City Mall across the street from Mother. This was our chance, but she missed the first bus on April 28th because she thought it was a false rumor. We talked to her and told her, this is your chance, get ready, start packing. So she did start packing, but she couldn't decide what to take, and she missed the second convoy on May 2nd. So 2 out of 2 convoys right across the street, she hadn't even shown up for either one. We lost hope at that point and thought that she probably didn't have the mental, physical, emotional strength that she needed to escape. Here's a picture of one of the earlier convoys, either April 28th or May 2nd, in the parking lot at the back of Port City. You can just barely see the fourth bus, but there are 4 buses here. May 6th was the third and last convoy out of Mariupol. Mother was finally packed and ready to go. She decided to take the silver tea set along with her legal documents in a push cart. She had her life savings and cash hidden on her body, her phone in her pocket, and the clothes on her back. As she locked the door on May 6th, she remembered the days when she lived here as a young wife and mother, later became a grandmother, and later, after that, a widow. However, she had summoned all of her strength and determination and vowed never to return through that door ever again. Mother went over to Port City parking lot on the morning of May 6th. However, the buses were delayed at Azovstal. Someone handed her a queue ticket in the 400s. Finally, on the evening of May 7th, 24 hours late, only 2 buses showed up, holding a maximum of 40 passengers, out of the hundreds, maybe thousands, that were waiting in the parking lot. Amid the crowd, one of the 2 buses pulled to a stop with the double doors right in front of her face. She immediately jumped on the bus with her push cart, grabbed the first seat, and refused to move. As the buses pulled away from Port City Mall, leaving hundreds behind, she sent off a quick text message to Donetsk with her dying telephone that said, "I'm on the bus." We were sitting around despondently, not really expecting any good news from Mariupol, when all of a sudden, out of the blue, we got a text message from Donetsk. "She's on the bus." We couldn't believe it. But it's not over yet. Now the buses are heading east to Bezimeni. The convoy then headed east to Bezimeni filtration camp, one of a network of over 20 such camps in occupied territory. As the word filtration implies, everybody goes in, but not everybody comes out. Filtration camps are the scenes of torture, disappearances, executions, and forced deportation of civilians to the Far East and Siberia in Russia. As soon as the buses pulled up to Bezimeni, males and females were separated and searched. Then everyone stood in line for hours. No drinks, no sitting, no food. Any visits to the toilet were escorted and closely watched by armed guards with dogs. At the front of the line, you surrender your telephone for download into a computer network. Then digital mugshots and fingerprints were taken and added to the database. Going into the interview, Mother was extremely worried because she had not had internet access since February and was unable to clean up her pro-Ukrainian social media posts. What she didn't know was that my wife had her passwords and had preemptively gone in and cleaned it up. Another problem, though, was the daughter in the USA. If the FSB interrogators found out about this, they would surely take her hostage and we would receive a ransom video. So she lied. When they asked her why she didn't want to go to Russia, she said that she had a daughter in Ukraine who had no telephone. They didn't believe this and threatened her that anyone who lies does not leave here alive. Somehow she cried and begged and passed through filtration. They stamped her document, which she took out to the bus, handed it over, and boarded. The last words said to her before the doors closed were, "If you ever come back, we'll kill you." This little 4-year-old girl was placed on Mother's bus alone because the mother was an army medic who was taken prisoner in filtration. We hadn't heard anything from Mother since the day before, going into filtration, that she was on the bus. Then we saw this video on May 8th of the convoy safely arriving in Ukrainian territory with her visible through the window. The Red Cross set up tents for the evacuees in Zaporizhia outside the train station parking lot. They could get a hot meal, medical attention, charge their phone, and just relax. It was a miracle that Mother was finally able to escape Mariupol after 73 days trapped in hell. Many survivors use that word to describe their experience, since nightmares you can always wake up, horror movies you can always change a channel, but from hell there is usually no escape. She slept one night there at the Red Cross tent and charged her phone before waking up and calling us the next day. She had our phone number hidden on a little piece of paper in her sock. She ended up taking the train that afternoon and arriving in Lviv in far western Ukraine the following afternoon. She was able to spend a few days relaxing in a nice little hotel in Market Square. Breakfast buffet, hot bath, climate control, warm bed, all the tap water she could drink. She could go walk outside, buy clothes, buy medicine. And then finally, she ended up going over the border to Poland, where I met her, and we flew back to USA together. First thing she said when we pulled up to our house from the airport is, "Where's your American flag?" Somehow I understood exactly what she meant, and I willingly bought one and have been flying an American flag ever since. Anyone who didn't escape Mariupol during those first 4 days has their own personal horror story to tell. There are thousands of such stories. Many of them are worse than our mother's. Tens of thousands were killed. Many were wounded. People died from illnesses due to lack of medicine or starved to death. Babies died of thirst in basement shelters. Elderly froze to death in their armchairs in upstairs apartments. Mother got out better than most. She at least got out in one piece, and she has her immediate family around her now. That's it for this episode. Thank you for watching. Next episode, we look at the aftermath and life under occupation.